Yo, what's good, people? What's up, y'all? Let's talk. Hit me up in the comments. Hit me up in the comments at Ty D Butler on social media. I'm on YouTube. We got the YouTube show popping. That's what we're streaming right now. We are, of course, streaming live on X as well and TikTok. Give me a follow. So we just got some news. If you're a Giant fan, what I want to talk to you about today is hang on a second, the rooting guide. Just as far as like the NFL playoffs are concerned, as it pertains to John Harbaugh and the John Harbaugh sweepstakes. But before we get into that, want to hit you real quick with this Adam Schefter nugget. Adam Schefter just put this tweet out, so I want to show it to you. Here it is. Former Raiders head coach Antonio Pierce, standout linebacker for the New York Giants, will interview tonight and Friday for the Giants head coaching job, per sources. I talked about this on SNY. Hit me up in the comments. I want to hear from y'all. I talked about this on SNY last Saturday night. And listen, Antonio Pierce, I would like to see him get another opportunity. The Raiders have become a place where coaches go to either die or be put on life support. And he earned the opportunity because of what he was able to do as an interim, and it just didn't work out once he got the permanent tag. But at some point, I would like to see him get another shot at it. I just would not be in favor of this happening with the Giants. And look, for many reasons, being a part of, if you're a Giant fan, a prosperous time, like winning a Super Bowl, how incredible of a feat it was winning that Super Bowl against the Patriots, that, the undefeated team. I get all of that. From an emotional standpoint, it would be cool. It's just not the right time to do that, because if you're the Giants, and look, I am being repetitive here. I come across like a broken record, but it's like, dog, y'all have been awful for far too long to not just go with a safe hire. Just be safe. Yo, take a little single, man. I can try because I'm fast enough to get to second in what will be a close play, but why risk it? Our offense is struggling. So against a dominant pitcher, take the single. And if I feel like at any point during this inning that, from a confidence standpoint, we're good enough to where I can swipe a bag, let's do it. Or if I'm like, hey man, great job, you got on base, and I gotta go get the pinch runner because he's an upgrade, then cool. Which is like a mixed metaphor. But for the Giants, worst record in football since 2017, I need a safe hire. I need what the Knicks had in Tom Thibodeau. stability, proven track record, and someone who I know instantly is going to galvanize that room, install some confidence because he's got a resume, demand respect because we've seen him do it before, which is what brings us to John Harbaugh. Listen, I didn't even feel like this should be controversial, but apparently some Giant fans, and it's built into Twitter behavior, social media behavior, and a lot of their analysis. Such homerism that even something as simple as me saying, if McDermott gets fired by the Buffalo Bills, that becomes the most attractive job on the market for John Harbaugh, inspires such like a vitriolic response. And I don't get how you consider that to be controversial. And I had people hitting me with, well, the Giants have a brighter future than the Buffalo Bills. What? And for people who know me and listen to me, y'all know whether it's because I'm a Jet fan or because I just reject how much of an allergy it has become for certain media members to like not criticize Josh Allen. I'm not this like ardent Buffalo Bills supporter. They are a team that should be winning back to back to back Super Bowls. I've been highly critical of Josh, not because I think he's bad, obviously. He is a fantastic quarterback. He's one of the 3, 4 best quarterbacks on the planet. But I think that some of the commentary surrounding him is flawed. With all that said, y'all, you want to sit here and tell me that the Giant job is more attractive than potentially the Buffalo Bills job? You are nuts. You are out of your mind. And this idea that the Giants have a brighter future than the Bills is crazy. What are we talking about? We're talking about Jackson Dart up against Josh Allen. And a lot of people, and this is where, like, sometimes when you have to correct the overcorrection, you come across as if you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So, all year long, I have said, I've seen enough. I am a believer in Jackson Dart. I think he's the franchise quarterback for the Giants. I fully trust that if this dude stays healthy, he is going to be legit, which is why I was opposed to this idea of shutting him down, post that concussion. Because I'm like, nah, man, like, let's see him go out there, get reps, continue to build confidence, and go up against opposing defenses where all that matters is experience. You can say what you want about how much film study matters. And listen, you got to go out there and ball out. On the other side of it, once we got to the point of the season where the Giants were within striking distance of the number 1 overall pick, I was like, all right, man, as a testament to how good I believe Jackson Dart is, let's set him because he can win you games. So I have been someone who has praised him. All of the adulation you could possibly dole at the feet of a rookie quarterback who none of us expected to look this good this quickly. I've been on the front line of that. But there is an element of, because Giant fans have been starved for this for so long, they go a little bit too far. And people in my mentions at Ty D. Butler telling me, I said, I would rather have, if I'm John Harbaugh, the guy in Josh Allen than the guy I hope becomes the guy in Jackson Dart. And people were like, man, Jackson Dart is already Josh Allen. To that, and to that I say, you are out of your mind. Because as critical as I am of the commentary surrounding Josh, I never denied his greatness. I've said he's overrated, like, just from the standpoint of he's the clear-cut best player in football. And prior to Mahomes' injury, I was like, nah, Patrick Mahomes the best quarterback in football. I thought Lamar was better than Josh Allen. Burrow's right there. So so when I am calling him overrated, Josh, it is not to demean him as a player. It's just to correct what the media narrative is surrounding him, if that makes sense. But he's an awesome football player, and you would be a fool to say otherwise. Which is why, like sometimes, as I just said, when you have to correct the overcorrection, it comes across as you talking out of both sides of your mouth. I still think Jackson Dart is awesome. I still think he is trending to be a franchise quarterback. I also think comparing him to Josh Allen is nuts. Josh, a reigning league MVP, Josh, who has been to what, 2 AFC championship games, who's a first team all pro guy. I mean, at some point, we have to understand that, yes, while excited about what Jackson Dart trends to and tracks to be, we have to, and Josh is a 2-time second team. I said first team. We have to settle down a little bit. Settle down a little bit. Jackson Dart's not Josh Allen. Let's not get that twisted. Let's not get that twisted. And for all the people in my mentions saying he already is, tell me this. So the Bills are in Jacksonville this weekend. They'll play the Jags. The Bills are 1.5-point favorites. So Vegas is telling you it is not a pick'em that the Bills are a better team, because if that game were in Buffalo, it's a 4.5-point spread, which is more than a field goal. If we swapped out Josh Allen for Jackson Dart, what does that spread look like in Jackson? A red hot Jacksonville team, red scorching hot. Not as hot as the Texans, who have won 10 straight games, but the Jags just week after week after week blowing teams out. If Jackson Dart is starting that game against Buffalo, what's the spread? How does your confidence level in Buffalo change if we swap Josh out for Jackson? And again, I am not trying to dismantle the hype train of Jackson Dart. All I am saying is let's chill out when we look at the juxtaposition of these two jobs. Would you rather, at this point, if you're John Harbaugh, coach the Bills or the Giants? And I think the Giants, that's a really good job. I just happen to think if Buffalo becomes open, that's an even better job, because you've got one of the 4 best quarterbacks in football. You've got the NFL's leading rusher. You've got the top 5 offensive line. And they'll make some changes. They got to get some more playmakers on the outside. That defense is like middle of the pack. So it's not the perfect roster, which is why I don't think they're winning the Super Bowl this year. I think they can win the AFC. I just don't think they're going to win it all. But is that a more attractive job than the Giants? Absolutely. And I think the Giants, that's a great job. So Giant fans in my mentions trying to come at me because of like the audacity of you to say the head coaching job of that potentially becomes available, where you've got an opportunity to coach Josh Allen, is better than coaching Jackson Dart, a team coming off of a 4-win season versus a team coming off of yet another double-digit win season and into the playoffs again. Come on, man. That's not the hot take that you think or want it to be. It's ridiculous. Which brings us to, hey, if you're a Giant fan, root for Buffalo this weekend. If they get clipped, I find it hard to believe, with the narrative surrounding the Bills the last couple of years about how they've been held back by their head coach. It's a combination of they just run into Patrick Mahomes. What can you do? And they get held back by their head coach. if they are one and done in the postseason, I find it hard to believe Sean McDermott is able to survive that. And I had a Bills fan in my mentions talking about how, the Pagulas, they love McDermott, they're hesitant to give up on him. And I said, listen, we just saw John Harbaugh get let go after 18 years. Sean McDermott, good coach, he's not John Harbaugh. So if you're Josh Allen, he's 29 years old. He's a running quarterback. Now I think he's got a long runway because the NFL now is set up to where you just have to assume that quarterbacks will play longer because of how the rules are set up and like these guys get protected. Josh is flopping around anyway. And so I think that where, historically running quarterbacks would have a shorter shelf life, I think this guy has the potential to play a very long time. He's that good. He is also playing in a league now that, as I mentioned, protects the quarterback. But Josh Allen at 29 has to look at whatever this championship window is. And the Bills front office has to look at this championship window is and not think that it's closing, but think that they've allowed a big opportunity to pass them by. Because when you, like, every coach will tell you the first order of business coming into the season is to win their division. Every coach will tell you that. First order of business, win your division. Next order of business, all right, now it's time to win a Super Bowl. But it starts and ends with winning your division, right? And the Bills have really had no trepidation about that since the end of Brady. Because, Belichick and Mac Jones, they made the playoffs their first year, but after that he flopped. And then Belichick was awful, toward the latter part of his tenure in New England. Then you got the Gerard Mayo situation. So the Bills have really essentially had no competition in the AFC East. The Jets, as we know, have been a train wreck. And then you have the Dolphins, who did make the playoffs, but were never really that big of a threat to Buffalo. I guess they almost beat them in the playoffs. That was a 3-point game. But, year after year, Buffalo, we knew was going to win the AFC East. Now that has changed. That's changed because a guy who might win the league MVP in Drake May now has not just a competent head coach, but a really damn good one. So that's another team in your division you've got to worry about that you play twice a year. So if this opportunity that has seen you year after year after year really easily win your division ends with you going one and done in the playoffs, and now you've got New England to worry about. Patrick's going to come back. He's missed the playoffs this year. Lamar's going to have a new head coach, so maybe they'll get a bump. All of a sudden, Trevor Lawrence looks like he's figured it out. You've got Bo Nix and the Broncos. We'll see what happens with Indianapolis in the quarterback situation, but the Texans year after year are in the playoffs, right? So the Chargers. So this path that, and then hopefully Joe Burrow can figure it out. So this path that has consistently involved or consistently been all we really have to worry about is Mahomes in the playoffs, now sees other challenges, other impediments on the road. A team in your division and all of these other organizations starting to figure it out with their head coach and quarterback combination. So if you look at the big picture of it, I'm not painting this image of the windows closing. But what you're saying is our best, I want to make sure I phrase this correctly. Not our best opportunity has, gone by the wayside. But it was probably never going to get quote unquote easier than it had been. It now becomes increasingly difficult to get to the promised land. And I just feel like a decision would have to be made, something significant, if this team doesn't win a playoff game. So if you're the Giant fan, root for the Bills to win this weekend. Root for them to go on some type of a playoff run because if McDermott can't get this team at least to the AFC Championship game, um, it might be clipped for him. Let's stay in the AFC. Actually, no, we go to the NFC. Let's start with the two teams that before the season realistically thought they could win a Super Bowl. One of those teams, the Green Bay Packers. And you start to look at this run for LaFleur. And this shocked me when it came out. But Diana Rossini, I want to say it was like 5 weeks ago, had a story in her weekly column. Teams are talking about Matt LaFleur could be coaching for his job. And I'm like, yo, Matt LaFleur now through 7 years in Green Bay, which wow, it's just amazing that it's been 7 years. Incredible. He's 76-40-1. He's had 4 double-digit win seasons, the 3 straight 13-win seasons with Rodgers, that ended with that 8-9 year that should have seen them make the playoffs, but they lost that Week 17 game against Detroit. They then go 9-8 the following year, but they're the 7th seed. They waxed the Cowboys in the playoffs. They're then 11-6 last year. They looked awful against Philadelphia in the playoffs, and now they're 9-7-1. So he's 76-40-1, 8-3 in 3-5 in the playoffs for Matt LaFleur. And there's just a lot of smoke around his job security. You go back the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, he's got 1 playoff win. Now, I look at Matt LaFleur, he's an incredible head coach. I look at the Green Bay Packers as a stable organization that you could argue actually keeps coaches too long than it is that they fire them prematurely. I thought they kept Mike McCarthy too long. But that roster and the trades they make, Micah Parsons, he blows out his ACL, but ownership and front office, Gutekunst could be looking at this thing and saying, we've invested a lot of resources into this team. We've invested a lot of resources into this team, and so it is going to be hard to really argue that the lack of success should warrant him keeping his job. It's going to be hard to argue that. So that's an interesting one to watch out for. If the Packers go to Chicago and lose that game this week, is it possible Matt LaFleur becomes the latest coach to get axed? It's possible. Now, here, I think if you're a Giant fan, it's like, should you root for the Bears to win because you would not like another job to come open that potentially is more attractive? The other way to look at that too is if LaFleur becomes available, that's another guy you can hire. Could you imagine LaFleur, who's, this offensive genius, paired up with Jackson Dart? So how would you view that? That's an interesting one to me. Because maybe the Packers are a more attractive destination for John Harbaugh. But could that also mean Matt LaFleur becomes a part of the mix? And so it's interesting. Very interesting. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you guys think about that. Let me know what you think about that. And then there's Philadelphia, because I mentioned 2 teams in the NFC. Philadelphia is an odd one. You know what? I start to find it annoying, the Nick Sirianni discourse. I find it to be really, really annoying. Because here we have a guy that's 59 and 26 in his coaching career. He's won damn near 70% of his games. And it's almost like the accepted, how do I say this? It's almost like what we've allowed to happen is because people don't approve of his behavior on the sidelines. eh, I- I- Sometimes he comes across as just like overwhelming and just obnoxious. That sullies his reputation overall as a head coach. Do you know how many games the Philadelphia Eagles won the year before Nick Sirianni got there? Nick Sirianni got there. They were a 4-win team. 2 years later, they win the NFC. So his first year he gets there, they're 9-8. Following year, 14-3, win the NFC. They had a 10-point lead in the Super Bowl, and then a turnover flipped that game. Probably should have won that. The following year after that, they're 11-6, but they didn't had that collapse at the end of the year where they lost. What was it? 5 of 6 games. Last year they're 14-3, win the Super Bowl. This year they're 11-6. And if they wanted to, would have been the number 2 seed. Decided we value rest over seeding, and now he's 59 and 26 as a head coach. He is 6-3 in the playoffs, and we just continue to find ways to pretend like, well, he's not that good. So you mean to so someone has to riddle me this, because the same people that don't believe Nick Sirianni's any good are the same folks who also have that opinion about Jalen Hurts. So in a league where all you see are head coach and quarterback combinations, if you get them right, they win. They get to the playoffs. You get them wrong, you've got no shot. But somehow, because you don't like how it looks, Sirianni, not that good. Jalen Hurts, not that good. And they've been to 2 of the last 3 Super Bowls. They've gone 59 and 26 in 5 years. They've won a Super Bowl. They're a double-digit win team 4 consecutive seasons. And yet, head coach not that good, quarterback not that good. Well, it must be Howie Roseman. Guys, we've all seen great rosters fold. We've all seen on paper this looks pretty good, but it not come together. Why? Because of head coaching malpractice, because of a quarterback who just wasn't up for the challenge. So this idea that we're just going to give Howie Roseman all the credit, Howie Roseman, who, by the way, hired Nick Sirianni, who, by the way, drafted Jalen Hurts, he gets all the credit. But once we get to having to dole out more credit for the rest of the team and its infrastructure, that just goes past or over the head of Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. It's really ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. With that said, though, why the Eagles are very interesting is if they lose this game, because it's this would be the second time in the last 3 years they went winless in the playoffs. So it's kind of like a hot and cold. You either make the Super Bowl or you go winless in the playoffs, right? If they get bounced in the first round, they lose a home game to the Niners, who they scored 3 points against the Seahawks in a must-win game. Well, not a must-win, but for the number 1 seed. How do you look at that? With all of the dissension that has taken place in that locker room, AJ Brown, like, do you feel like this, because he clearly got the offensive coordinator position wrong with Kevin Patullo, like, does that warrant a change there? And even if it doesn't warrant a change, are you jumping at the opportunity to do that because you're just so attracted and so in love with John Harbaugh? Nick Sirianni's got to be thinking, hey man, I've been in more Super Bowls than John Harbaugh. I've won just as many Super Bowls as John Harbaugh. I've been more successful than that man. So it becomes interesting in Philadelphia. Really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. The Eagles situation. Um, so you've got the Bills, the Eagles, and the Packers. In theory, those jobs could have openings if those teams disappoint in the playoffs. So if you're a Giants fan, I say you root for them to have some success. I say that's what you root for. I know it's not in your nature to root for the Philadelphia Eagles, but if you want John Harbaugh, that's what you got to do. Um, it also is worth mentioning. Schefter put this out last night. Schefter put this out last night. Let's see. This is about, all right, here we go. John Harbaugh, former Ravens head coach John Harbaugh, not expected to conduct any head coach interviews until next week. Now, this is a shrewd move by a smart man for all of the reasons we mentioned. Depending on how this weekend goes, you could see coaches get let go. Now, there are a bevy of jobs open right now: the Titans, the Browns, the Falcons, the Giants. There are a bevy of teams right now looking for head coaches. Bevy of teams. But Raiders, throw the Raiders and Arizona in there, right? But there could be some jobs that is more attractive. Tampa Bay, we still have yet to learn the fate of Todd Bowles. Maybe Miami decides, hey, we want to get rid of Mike McDaniel. Then the three teams I mentioned: Buffalo, Green Bay, Philadelphia. So it's smart for John to wait to see what ends up happening with those other teams, because you don't want to limit yourself to just the options available at the moment when you can go big game hunting. So that's why I thought that this report last night was, expected, not shocking at all, but also very smart by John Harbaugh. Just see what happens this weekend. Just see what happens. And we're already hearing that there are some teams checking in with his agent, teams that still employ their head coach. None of those teams, the Jets, which, I mean, we knew the Jets were not going to make any changes there, but I guess you held out hope that something miraculous could happen. Kevin Zwicker, if you have time to get to it, what is your opinion on the narrative of Moore should go back to school to avoid the Jets? So, all right, so I have a very nuanced take on this. Even though I'm a fan of the Jets, and it's one of those things where it's like, I can talk about my wife, you can't. I can talk about my kids, you can't. I can criticize whoever it is, but you can't, because it just feels uncomfortable when someone else is doing it. I can do it, you can't do it. So there's an element of that when you hear people ripping the Jets, and it's low hanging fruit, bad organization. You get that ire because it's your team, man. Like, your team is an embarrassment. And while you understand the public criticism, it's your team. So you, in some ways, want to be the only ones that criticizes them. Also, must be noted that just for a year, yeah, Dante Moore could earn just as much money going back to college as he would in year one of his rookie contract. So I get all of that. The Jets are dysfunctional, and we lay out, what makes them attractive. All the five first round picks, and the cap space, and an incredible offensive line. You got Garrett Wilson coming back. Maybe you bring back Brees. There are a lot of things that, like, in theory, you could be excited about as a young quarterback. And I think it was Peter Schrager who made the case of any team with Of any team most ready for a young quarterback to come in, of all the teams who are quarterback needy, the most attractive one going into it is the Jets because of what they have. The problem with that is pretty simply, what does it all matter? And this goes back to the Eagles conversation. How good your roster can be, how good the situation can be if you don't have a head coach. Doesn't really matter one iota. And so I get it. I get why folks are going on national television calling the Jets an atrocity, saying they're garbage, which, Garrett Wilson wasn't in love with, understandably so. I understand that part. I get that Moore could go back to college and 1 year earn just as much money in his rookie contract as he would had he entered the draft. Are you turning down being drafted number 2 overall? Like, is that something you're so comfortable with? Knowing that you play in a sport as violent as college as football, you are that comfortable just saying, I could be the number 2 overall pick in the draft. I'll pass because I don't want to play for the Jets. How about if the Jets are sitting number 2 overall again next year, or sitting number 1 overall? What happens then? You're gonna go back to college again? Like, so it almost becomes like a reindeer game, and uh, part of it also feels like agents get in the ears of some of these analysts and some of these insiders, so they put it out there to maybe to try to scare off the Jets. But I just can't imagine like that's the smart play. If you are being told you're going to be the second pick in the draft, you think it's smart for you to go back to college, risk injury, or risk like just a simple regression to where you have a pretty good season, but it's not as great as people expected, or it's not as great as any other cat. So now your draft stock pummels just a bit. This is a golden opportunity. And by the way, he could go number 1 overall. That still remains to be seen. That still remains to be seen. Because if he goes out there in this game against Indiana, an Indiana defense that has been lights out tomorrow night, and balls out, and that's the last we see of Fernando Mendoza, and he's moving on and he wins a national championship, you don't think folks are going to be ready to say he's the number 1 pick in the draft? There are people who believe he could be it right now, and they don't love the inexperience, but it's on the table. And so it feels like a lot of fodder, and we get that at this time of year. And so I don't put too much stock into it, but what I will say is, as a fan of the New York Jets, it is just embarrassing to be a part of conversations like that. Again, it happened with Peyton, right? It's like, well, you would rather not play. You'd rather go back to. You would rather punt on entering the draft where you were a consensus top 2 pick. You'd rather do that than play for the Jets. That's sad. That's a sad place to be. Incredibly sad. And so, do I think it's actually going to happen? No. I think, assuming he plays well Friday night, whether they win or lose, he is going to be one of the first 2 quarterbacks taken, and it will be pretty early in this draft. With both the teams picking 1 and 2 need quarterbacks. You don't love the lack of experience. Played 28 games. Played 14 games this year. 5 games last year. So 28 total games. 9 in Oregon, or 19 at Oregon, and 9 at UCLA. You don't love it, but people are raving about the natural talent and raw ability. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be this scout, but there's an entire draft process that takes place, which, by the way, includes another game to be played tomorrow night. So, what does that mean for him going forward? I think that means you will see Dante Moore declared for the draft. I think that's what that means. I think that is absolutely what that means. Um, I feel like I am getting to a point, just to stick with the Jets for a moment, where I'm getting tired of talking about Aaron Glenn. It's very depressing to listen to it, to talk about it, because everything about this season, regardless of where your expectations were, was not just an embarrassment, but maybe the biggest embarrassment in franchise history. No, there weren't expectations of you making the playoffs or winning, double digit games or any of that nonsense. But the expectation was for you to be functional, for you to be disciplined, for you to appear to be headed in the right direction, for you to look like a team establishing a culture. We like to use that word, right? And nothing we saw for 17 games illustrated anything close to that. So it's just miserable to live through. And then you don't even get like the off-season reprieve because uh, one of the easiest ways to find optimism or a glimmer of hope, as sad as it is to say, is for you to fire your head coach, and now you're on to what you hope to be bigger and better things. And in an off-season where you could see Matt LaFleur shake loose, Mike Tomlin, I guess his job is still, one that could be his services could be available. John Harbaugh's already there. Kevin Stefanski. So it's a pretty lucrative crop. It's a pretty lucrative core of coaches that hands down are better than Aaron Glenn. So in an offseason, I could see all of this movement. Throw in Nick Sirianni. Could you imagine Nick Sirianni in New York? Throw in him. Like it's wild that of course the Jets would have this kind of season when they are going into year 2 of their head coach who's on a 5-year contract, because there's just no way to upgrade. Well, they can upgrade. They're just going to elect not to. So now I'm starting to feel like it's a pointless conversation because we know it's not going to happen. So we just have to move on, move forward, and look ahead to the draft and hope that this guy turns it around. Which at this point, none of us have any confidence that he's capable of doing so, devoid of any evidence that exists. So, man, we talk about it, we talk about it, we talk about it. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing is going to happen. It just is what it is. And you got to hope that they find a quarterback. And not only do they find a quarterback, but they surround the quarterback with weapons and coaches who can contribute to his growth and not have the quarterback's coach be a non-quarterback. Because that's one of the worst parts of this. You've got Charles London was a running back, and he's your quarterback's coach. So how are you trying to take Justin Fields and say, all right, last shot for him. He's talented. Let's fully unlock his potential. What we're going to do is put him under center for a team that doesn't have a number 2 wide receiver. Sure, they have Garrett Wilson, but no number 2 wide receiver. We're going to have a rookie offensive coordinator, guy who's never done the job before. We're going to have a quarterback's coach who's a running back. And our head coach is going to be a defensive coordinator, defensive-minded head coach. And you expected that to work, which is why it was so foolish. And this is not to defend Justin Fields. He was bad. But it was foolish for the owner to sit up there and embarrass that man when, yes, he was bad, but you don't do that to a player under contract, a player who the head coach who you love just gave 2 years, $30 million guaranteed to. You also don't do that to someone who wasn't put in a great situation And where have you heard this before? Young Jet quarterback with great potential, not put in the most favorable position to excel and succeed. So it's just more of the same, man. More of the same. All right, I'll be back tomorrow. We preview some NFL games. Hit me up, Tidy Butler. That is on X on social media platforms like Instagram as well. Follow the YouTube page. Talk to y'all later. Deuces, man.